the line of the 13 markers on these various samples, is that right?
That is correct.
Why not all 13?
Once I obtained a match with the Derek Van Dam profile, there was no added or more useful information I could have obtained by adding the additional genetic markers in the case.
Is that because this was an item of evidence, to your knowledge, that was actually found inside the Van Dam home?
That's correct.
All right, could you go to the next stain that you tested and obtained results from?
In the stain that was designated as 8-2, I got a mixture of DNA from more than one individual. Derek Van Dam is likely the major or predominant contributor to that mixture.
I'm going to stop you for a moment. Can you describe what you mean by mixture, first of all?
Certainly. When a mixture, it appears as though there is more than one DNA donor to a given sample.
How do you know that?
Based on the number of peaks in the case of STRs that we get. Ordinarily, if it was a single source sample, at any given genetic marker, I would expect to see at most 2 peaks.
I'm sorry.
What?
No, I was just going to say, is that because an individual has at most 2 particular types at a given location of our DNA?
That is correct.
So you saw, in terms of a mixture, more than 2, is that right?
That's correct.
All right, I think I interrupted you. I apologize.
Oh, so based on the presence of more than 2 types at a given genetic marker, that's an indication to me that there is more than one donor of DNA to that individual genetic marker.
I think you were talking about Derek as appearing to be the major contributor to that mixture, is that right?
That's correct.
Tell us what you mean by major contributor.
Often we have the ability to determine just how much DNA is present at a particular area that we're testing. So if I get a strong profile and then a very, very weak profile at one particular genetic marker, that indicates to me that there is a predominant donor, or that most of the DNA that I'm picking up is from that individual, and then the weak types I'm getting tells me that I'm picking up kind of a secondary, weaker DNA profile.
In this particular sample, and I'm sorry, what was the number designation of it again?
That was an 8-2.
You determined that Derek was the likely person who left most of that DNA?
That's correct.
Now, does that mean that there's also a minor contributor?
Yes, it does.
All right, can you tell us what, if anything, you were able to determine from the types from the minor contributor and the known samples in this case?
I determined that Dylan Van Dam, Danielle Van Dam, Damon Van Dam, Brenda Van Dam, and David Westerfield are all eliminated as being a potential contributor of the minor component of the mixture.
Now, in this particular stain, most of the DNA was from Derek, is that right?
That's correct.
And someone left the smaller part of DNA on that stain.
That is correct.
Could that have been deposited at any time in relation to, for example, the stain or portion of the stain donated by Derek? Does that question make sense?
Yes, I'd have no way of determining how long the DNA's been on the item.
Does the other person's DNA even have to be blood when you find a mixture containing blood?
It does not have to be, no.
What else can it be?
DNA could be left there from saliva and perspiration, that sort of thing. Could also, someone's DNA could be left behind through that kind of deposition.
Could it be from a child?
I'd have no way of determining child versus adult.
Now, was there another, or at least one or more stains you also obtained results on?
Yes, on the stain that's designated 8-4, that was also a DNA mixture. I have that Derek Van Dam cannot be excluded as being the major contributor to the mixture, and that Danielle Van Dam, Dylan Van Dam, and Brenda Van Dam cannot be excluded as being the minor contributor to that mixture.
All right, just so we're clear, with respect to this stain 8-4, the major DNA types, or it is at least more than half of the DNA, is that a safe way of putting it? As far as the major portion?
That's correct, more than half.
Could have come from Derek?
Could have come from Derek Van Dam, yes.
And that the smaller portion could have come from Danielle, Dylan, or Brenda, is that correct?
None of those individuals could be excluded as being a potential contributor to the minor DNA component.
But Mr. Westerfield was excluded.
Mr. Westerfield was excluded.
Now, that's 3 of the stains. Tell us about the remaining 4.
On the stains that's designated 8-1, 8-5, and 8-7, the DNA recovered from those 3 areas was at a level below which meaningful conclusions could be drawn.
So there wasn't enough DNA for you able to give us results.
That's correct.
And does that leave one more stain, I think?
That actually leaves 8-6 and then also the control, and I got no DNA types off those stains.
Now I'd like to shift your attention to other evidence. In particular, were you asked to examine any evidence identified as coming from Mr. Westerfield's residence and motorhome?
Yes, I was.
Were you asked to examine an item identified as number 5, bedding from the defendant's washing machine?
Yes, I was.
What were you asked to do as far as that examination was concerned?
I was asked to screen through the evidence, which means visually examine it to see if I see anything that would lead me to believe that there is a blood stain on it that would require further testing.
When you examine items for blood stains, and let's use the example of clothing or bedding in this instance, are blood stains the only thing you were looking for?
That's kind of is on a case-by-case basis. In this particular instance, I was focused on searching for blood stains.
What if in examining this set of items you came upon other evidence? Do you ignore it, make note of it, or what?
If I encounter trace evidence, when I say trace evidence, I'm mainly referring to hairs and fibers. If I see hairs and fibers on a particular item, what I will do is I will isolate those in what I call a folded paper bindle. I do that in order so that while I'm manipulating the particular item looking for my blood stains, I don't end up losing that evidence. So in order to preserve it so that it's secure, I remove it with tweezers, I place it into a bindle, and that way I know that that particular evidence is secure and we don't run the potential of it getting lost or misplaced.
With regard to item number 5, the bedding from the washing machine, did you find any trace evidence in your examination of that material?
Yes, I did.
What?
I found a number of hairs on a number of different items, all of which, one by one, I picked off with tweezers and put into a folded paper bindle.
And did you preserve them accordingly?
Yes, I did.
Is there any way that a later analyst can tell where they came from in terms of which item number by the way you labeled it?
Yes, I label on the outside of the bindle that it was trace evidence collected off item number 5, and then that bindle was repackaged along with item number 5, so that way a later analyst could always go back to that item, take my bindle out, and also go back to the original item itself for analysis.
Were you also asked to look at clothing identified as coming from the top of the dryer, item number 6?
Yes, I was.
In the course of that examination, did you discover any trace type evidence as you've used that term?
Yes, similar to item number 5, whenever I would examine an item and then I would see hairs or fibers adhering to that, I would just go through with and collect them all into the paper bindle, so that way an analyst in a different discipline, for instance trace evidence, could always take my bindle and do their particular type of analysis on that.
And did you label those hairs accordingly as coming from item number 6?
Yes, I did.
All right. If I can go back a moment to the beanbag chair, item number 8. You received cuttings, is that right?
I actually received swabs.
Swabs, excuse me. Very good. And that's what you used to conduct your testing?
That's correct.
All right. Thank you. I don't have any more questions.
All right. Cross-examination. Just to carry up, good morning, sir. Just to follow up what Mr. Clark mentioned, what was the size of the stain on the beanbag chair?
I never actually saw the stain itself. All I got was a swab. A swabbing of the stain, so I never saw the stain.
Well, you talked about major and minor contributors of DNA. Is it the case that if the swab if there was a stain that was 6 inches, we'll say, and there was an unequal distribution of DNA, blood, whatever, if the person that generated this swab placed the swab in a particular location, is there a possibility that your results might not accurately reflect who was the predominant contributor of the entire stain, as opposed to just that section of the stain that was swabbed? You understand what I'm asking you?
Yes, and I'm not sure if, in fact, the entire stain was swabbed or how much of the stain was swabbed. I think in some instances, based on the size of the stain, the entire stain gets swabbed onto the cotton.
Specifically directing your attention to the beanbag chair. You never saw that stain, correct?
That's correct.
So you don't know whether or not your conclusions are based upon perhaps an aberration based upon where the person swabbed from.
Objection, I think that calls for speculation.
Sustained. You need that. Let's try it this way. Your Honor, I know that the court had papers that we could stick up.
That's a good question. Mike, do you know where the butcher paper pad went? Here.
I'm sorry.
Be labeled 125 for identification.
Thank you. So I'm placing in the lower right corner exhibit. I've just drawn a circle on what's been marked 125. That's a correct statement, isn't it?
Yes.
Let's assume hypothetically this circle is a beanbag chair. Okay?
Okay.
I'm going to put just a rectangle in the middle of the chair. In the middle of the circle, okay?
Yes.
I want you to assume that the rectangle is a blood stain. In fact, the specific blood stains you may be hypothetically discussing or that you actually discussed on direct, okay?
Okay.
If the predominant majority of the blood or DNA is in the center of the stain, there are portions of DNA throughout the stain, and the evidence tech hypothetically only drew a stain from the circle that I just drew on the left. Might that, your conclusions, be based, again, solely upon where the analyst swabbed?
Yes, if you're talking about a blood stain that's that large, yes, potentially, if there was blood from one contributor only deposited in one area of a larger stain, then it is possible that you wouldn't get to see the a representative sample of the mixture.
And without, and since you never, I'm sorry, I'm about to put another chart up on the board. Directing your attention to what's been previously marked 23, more specifically directing your attention to photographs J, H, and I. I'd like you to assume in 23 H, I, and J, that's the beanbag chair from which you got the swab.
Okay.
You see the stain?
Do I see any stains on there?
Yes.
Not from a quick glance of it, no.
Have you ever seen these photos before?
I have not.
Did anybody give you a Polaroid to show you what the stain looked like before you did your analysis?
I don't recall ever seeing a Polaroid or a photographic representation of the stains prior to my analysis.
So then it's fair to say, isn't it, that at least with regard to your conclusion regarding major and minor donator, that conclusion is dependent upon whether or not the analyst swabbed the area where there was the predominant amount of DNA?
Yeah, the only thing I can do is test what's on the swab.
So it's conceivable that there's a greater quantity of DNA in a stain than that which you tested in this case, correct?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
It's conceivable that you tested an area that did not accurately depict the entire quantity of DNA that was actually on that beanbag chair.
Objection, I think that calls for speculation.
Sustained. Get that answer. With regard to major and minor contributors, do you quantify? Is there some standard that says a major contributor is someone who gives 98% of a stain, and a minor contributor is someone who gives 2% or less of a stain?
There is some quantification that's done in terms of based on the intensity of the signal we're getting, which gives us an indication of the quantity of DNA. So we would compare the quantity of the DNA from the major contributor and the minor contributor in order to make a determination that someone is a minor contributor.
And specifically directing your attention to the stain that Mr. Clark was asking you about, the one that you could not rule out Danielle Van Dam as a contributor to. You can't tell me what the source of that DNA was?
Objection vague.
Do you understand the question?
I'm not sure.
All right, repeat it.
Thank you. Specifically directing your attention to the area of the beanbag chair from which the stain sourced. You cannot tell me whether or not that was Danielle Van Dam's blood?
That's correct.
You can't rule it out, correct?
I could not rule it out.
So your conclusion is that at least the existence of that stain is consistent with the proposition that at some point Danielle Van Dam bled in that particular area, correct?
That's not correct.
You rule it out?
I couldn't absolutely rule it out. All I can say is that Danielle Van Dam is consistent with being a minor contributor to the mixture. That could be from saliva, that could be from perspiration, it could be from blood.
Saliva is speculation to a certain extent, isn't it? Because you don't know.
Absolutely.
Perspiration is speculation, again.
Yes,
And blood is speculation, correct?
and that is correct.
Each of those three, though, are equally as reasonable based upon your conclusions. Isn't that correct?
I would agree with that, yes.
So therefore, Danielle Van Dam could have been a contributor of blood to the particular stain that you evaluated.
And she would have been a minor contributor.
Well, you're saying minor. You told us you couldn't tell us when the stain was placed there, correct?
That is correct.
Hypothetically, there might have been an existing stain from, I think, Dylan Van Dam or another one of the children Van Dams. Is that correct?
Yes, specifically Derek.
Okay, Derek, that constituted the majority, or what you're calling the major contribution. Is that right?
That is right.
That could be sitting there, we'll say, hypothetically, for 6 weeks. That's a reasonable thing to say, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And then, 15 minutes later, or strike that, on February 1st, hypothetically, Danielle Van Dam could have deposited some blood on that particular blood stain that you evaluated. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And your conclusions do not rule out that as a possibility, correct?
I could not rule that out, only that she would be the minor contributor.
So in other words, she might have bled less than the existing stain, correct?
Deposited less DNA, yes.
Now, Mr. Clark asked you about 13 areas of DNA molecules. Isn't there more than 13, or aren't there more than 13 areas of DNA molecules?
In the DNA molecule, are there more than 13 areas?
Yes.
Yes, there are.
How many more?
Many more.
What's many?
I couldn't probably give you an exact number.
An approximate number, based on your training and experience, sir.
Again, I would just be speculating. I don't have a good way to quantify that for you.
Well, you were specifically asked on direct examination about the 13 areas of DNA molecules, and we've seen these charts that articulate 13 areas. There's really a significantly greater number than 13 in the DNA molecule, isn't that right?
Objection asked and answered.
You can answer that, overruled.
I think if I understand what you're asking about, we examine up to 13 different areas because what we're looking for is areas in the DNA molecule where individuals vary. And there are going to be more areas in the DNA molecule than 13 where individuals are going to vary.
All right. And if hypothetically there's 14 or 15 or 20 areas where individuals vary, and you only test 13, they could exclude, correct, or be excluded in 14 through 20. Isn't that right? Because a non-match in any area constitutes an exclusion. Isn't that right?
Without testing those, I couldn't even comment.
Well, isn't it the case that a non-match in any of the particular genetic areas, the 13 areas, would constitute an exclusion?
If in fact you're able to come up with a 14th or 15th area where there was a difference between a stain and an individual, that would be an exclusion, yes.
But even within the 13, if there's a variation, that would constitute an exclusion. Is that right?
That is right.
Were you asked to examine a pair of pajamas?
Yes, I was.
What kind of pajamas were they?
Are you looking for just a general description of the color or I guess I'm wondering, when you say what kind of pajamas, what are you looking for in terms of color, size?
Can you tell me, please, give us the best description you possibly can, as you know, complete as you can, the pajamas that you were asked to examine?
I remember that they were blue and white in color, and they had the cartoon character Powerpuff Girls on them.
So you understood them to be a pair of Danielle Van Damme's pajamas, isn't that right?
I understood that they came from the floor of her bedroom.
All right. And did you inspect that pair of pajamas for the purpose of locating possible blood?
Yes, I did.
And did you perform presumptive tests on that pair of pajamas for the purpose of identifying the presence or absence of presumptive blood?
Yes, I did.
And in fact, you located a red-brown stain on the pajama top, isn't that right?
That's correct.
You identified it as item 2, or 2-1, isn't that correct?
That is correct.
You also conducted a presumptive test for blood on a shirt, which was later identified as item 3A in the evidence list. Is that correct, sir?
That is correct.
Let me ask you, with regard to the pajama, did you do DNA on the pajamas?
I personally did not know.
Do you know if anybody did?
My understanding is that it was sent to a private laboratory.
So, we don't know. All right, so you don't have any information as to what the outcome of the DNA testing on this particular clothing item is that correct?
That is correct.
You told us that, I'm switching subjects, sorry. You told us you went to the recovery scene.
Yes, I did.
Mr. Clark asked you whether or not you found any teeth. Did you look inside Danielle Van Damme's mouth?
I did not look inside of her mouth, no.
You said that you got close enough to the body to see, is that correct?
That is correct.
Could you see any teeth?
I don't recall at this point if I could specifically see teeth or not.
Was one of your purposes, were you assigned the specific task of locating teeth at the scene?
Yes, following actually the removal of the body, it was indicated to me that there was importance placed on seeing if we could locate any other teeth.
I'm sorry, any other teeth? You mean some teeth had apparently been recovered?
No, I didn't mean to imply that. Any teeth.
And that word came to you after the body was removed, is that correct?
That is correct.
Did you see the body removed?
Yes, I did.
Can you describe that process, please?
The medical examiner arrived, and under his supervision, the body was placed onto a white sheet, wrapped in that white sheet, and then placed into a body bag, and it was removed in the body bag.
Well, when you say the medical examiner arrived, you mean Dr. Blackburn arrived, is that right?
As memory serves, yes.
Well, he's a doctor with a beard, right?
Yes.
And when you said at his direction, you mean members of his staff were directed by him to place the body on a sheet, is that correct?
He arrived, he does his examination at the scene, and then when he's done with his examination, he directs other individuals that it is okay now to remove the body.
Those other individuals, do you know who they were?
No, I do not.
Do you know whether or not they were medical examiner staff?
No, not for sure, no.
Do you know whether or not they were law enforcement staff?
Objection. I think we're getting beyond the scope here.
Substantially sustained. Next area, please.
When you were inspecting the body, sir, were you wearing protective clothing?
I believe I had a pair of protective gloves on.
But not a uniform, for instance, or a jumpsuit of any kind?
That's correct.
And how close did you come to the body, sir?
I would say I walked up to it, but I didn't, actually, at one point I did handle the body in order to assist another criminalist.
Who was that?
That'd be a neck here.
Did you find any hair on the body?
Objection vague.
Sustained.
Specifically, excuse me, Your Honor. Specifically directing your attention to one of the armpits of Danielle Van Dam. Do you recall seeing a hair there?
I do not know.
When you say you do not know, are you using the word N-O or K-N-O-W?
I mean N-O.
All right. How were you dressed, other than the gloves? What sort of clothing were you wearing, sir?
I was just wearing standard slacks and sweatshirt.
So, in other words, you didn't put any particular clothes on other than the gloves?
Are you referring to protective clothing?
Yes.
It would just be the gloves, yes.
Did you collect any hair from the body?
I did not know. No, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. That is correct. I did not collect any hair from the body.
Did you observe hairs being collected from the body?
I observed hairs being collected that were next to the body.
Did you also, sir, go into the SUV?
Objection beyond the scope.
Overruled, he's testified as to the motorhome. You may answer that.
I think this is a different question, Your Honor, or different vehicle.
I concede, Your Honor. I mean, I'm referring to the forerunner of the SUV as opposed to the motorhome.
Well, he can answer that yes or no.
I did not do anything to the motor. I'm sorry, I did not do anything to the SUV.
Did anybody present to you floor mats from the SUV?
Same objection.
Duly noted, overruled, in the answer.
Yes, I did.
And did you examine the floor mats for the purpose of obtaining trace evidence?
No, I did not.
Sir, you prepared a series of reports in connection with your activities in the case, is that right?
Yes, I did.
Approximately how many reports did you prepare?
I believe 6.
Specifically directing your attention, sir, to your report dated 5/3/02, but I'm not sure which number of sequence that is, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I will find it.
Counselor's page 6,274.
Yes, I found the report.
You articulated in the report items 28 and items 29, is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
They reflect a floor mat. Do they not? 28 reflects a floor mat, 29 reflects a floor mat, is that correct?
That is correct.
Objection beyond the scope.
Sustained. I'll hear you sidebar, however, on Mr. Coleman.
Yes, Your Honor.
Oh, time for break? Yeah. Oh. Okay, that just means that Mr. Clark didn't raise the issue and Mr. Feldman's going into a different issue. No word sidebar, I said Mr. Feldman can go into the issue. So now you're up to speed. All right.
Sir, I'd like to specifically direct your attention to items 28, 29, 30, and 31. These were items that were represented to have been sourced from the SUV, a 4Runner, isn't that correct?
That's correct.
And you evaluated these for, just biological evidence and not trace?
Yes, my primary duty was looking for biological evidence.
Did you find any biological evidence on any of that, any of those items?
No, I did not.
So based on that conclusion, that you didn't find any biological evidence, at least insofar as you're concerned, we can exclude Danielle Van Dam from being in the SUV, isn't that true?
Objection argumentative, lack of foundation.
Sustained.
You cannot, based on your findings, include Danielle Van Dam as ever having been in the SUV. Is that right?
Objection.
Duly noted. Sustained.
Sir, did you say that you tested items that were in the 5 series of exhibits?
I'm sorry, I don't understand what you
Mr.
mean.
Clark was asking you questions about some of the tests that you did, and I thought that you had mentioned you may have looked at towels or matters that were claimed to have sourced from the Westerfield residence.
That's correct, yes.
Those items that you examined, can you tell us what they were, please?
Item number what was identified to me as item number 5 were the contents of the washing machine in Mr. Westerfield's residence.
With regard to the contents, were they all put together?
All the contents were in one paper bag
Together,
together.
not separately packaged.
They were not separately packaged.
Did you also observe items that were represented to have come from the top of the dryer?
Yes, I did.
Were they all similarly packaged?
They were similarly packaged, yes.
Meaning that they were all placed in a single bag, is that correct?
Yes,
There was no separation between the items.
that's correct.
In addition to the evidence you've now discussed, did you also have occasion to test a laundry bag containing a wad of paper towels and a bath towel?
I actually believe I looked at 2 different laundry bags at different times.
Okay. I'm now specifically referring to your reports for February 21, 2002. It's Discovery 6096.
Yes, yes.
So now I'm specifically directing your attention, sir, to items that come off of property tag 850125. And you note item 21 is a laundry bag containing a wad of paper towels, is that correct?
That is correct.
And you noted a teal jacket as item number 22 from the floor area, I'm sorry, a teal jacket from floor of cargo area, is that correct?
That is correct.
You looked at both the laundry bag and some of its contents as well as the jacket for the purpose of identifying biological fluids, is that right?
Yes, I did.
Included within the concept of biological fluids would be semen, is that right?
That is right.
Based upon your analysis, you did that testing that you're trained to do, is that correct?
Yes,
And you concluded, did you not, that there were no blood or semen stains detected on the laundry bag or its contents?
correct.
And the contents included paper towels, a bath towel, which was identified as item 21, the jacket that was identified as item 22, and a roll of plastic trash bags that were identified as item 51 and 64. Is that correct, sir?
That is correct.
In addition, you looked at shoes and boots that were represented to have been seized from the Westerfield residence. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Those were identified as items, I guess item 146 and 147. Is that right, sir?
That is right.
With regard to your evaluation of 146 and 147, you concluded there was no blood on the shoes or the boots, correct?
That is correct.
I'm sorry, I want to redirect your attention to the crime scene. I'm sorry, the recovery scene. Sir, you specifically looked at the recovery scene for the purpose of determining the presence or absence of drag marks. Is that correct?
I made that observation while I was there, yes.
It's correct. There were no drag marks associated. Is that right, sir?
That is right.
You also evaluated the area of the recovery scene to a certain extent. Isn't that right?
That is right.
And you concluded that there was a large quantity of trash that littered the area.
Yes.
You also collected what appeared to be hairs from the ground beside the right leg and foot of the body. Isn't that right?
Specifically, criminalist Annette Pierre did that, yes.
And you concluded, did you not, that whether parked on the dirt road or on the side of Dehesa Road, it appeared to you that the perpetrator would have had to enter the grouping of trees from the north side?
Correct.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Anything further, Mr. Clark?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Kornacki, I think it was item 2-1, the pajama top, where you located a bloodstain, correct?
That's correct.
Can you tell us where it was located on that pajama top?
On the cuff of the left sleeve,
Now, was that the pajama top or the shirt that was item 3? Do you recall?
that was on the cuff of the left sleeve.
Okay, let's talk about the pajama top. And I'm sorry, you located that stain, I believe that was item 2-1, is that correct?
Yes,
On the cuff, is that correct?
that's correct.
What about the other item, item number 3, the other piece of clothing, the shirt?
The discolored area that gave me a positive presumptive test was also on the cuff of the left sleeve.
It wasn't on the back area of either of those items, that is the back of the body of the shirt?
That's correct.
Now, this test that you use, this DNA test, it's a very sensitive test, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
In other words, can it obtain results from even fairly small samples of DNA?
Yes, it can.
As far as that beanbag chair is concerned, first of all, let me rephrase it, is the test sufficiently sensitive that can even pick up DNA left from a person by rubbing against something and not even bleeding, spitting, or leaving a fluid?
Speculation. Overruled. Can you answer?
It says a general rule, no, I wouldn't expect to see a DNA transfer by just specifically rubbing with the absence of a body fluid.
Do you ever obtain DNA results, for example, from a piece of clothing with no apparent staining?
Sometime we are asked to find what's called the habitual wear of an item of clothing, and when we do that, we focus on the underarm area and also the collar areas, since those areas adhere most closely to the skin, and also when people sweat, those are areas that typically gather a lot of perspiration in them.
So, for example, repeated rubbing of the skin against a surface can, in fact, leave enough DNA for you as an expert to obtain results on occasion.
Replicant's objection.
Overruled. You can answer that.
It's possible, although I still say that it would require perspiration in order to probably get a sufficient quantity of DNA in order to get a profile off of.
So if a person were to perspire onto a substance, you can obtain sufficient DNA, at least in the course of your testing sometimes.
Hasn't been answered.
Overruled. You can answer that.
In my experience, yes.
When we talk about a mixture, and you obtained results showing a mixture, I think, on 2 different stains, is that correct, from the beanbag?
That's correct.
Those mixtures don't have to be blood on top of blood, do they?
They do not.
And from your results, can you even tell us necessarily whether Danielle ever even bled onto that chair, despite the results showing that something could have come from her?
I cannot make the statement that she's ever bled or not bled.
Now, in dealing with these, and I think you gave us one statistical estimate actually for one stain that was consistent with Derek, is that right?
Yes, it is.
That was the stain where there was no indication that that was a mixture, correct?
That's correct.
I think you gave us, was it the chances of someone other than Derek having left that stain were in the trillions or rarer, is that correct?
Trillions or rare, yes.
Is there much reason to test any further markers to make that number even rarer?
No, I see no need to do additional testing on that stain.
Lastly, with regard to the washing machine items, and I think you said that the items identified in item number 5 as coming from the washing machine were packaged together, is that correct?
That is correct.
Is there anything significant about packaging those items together as opposed to separately based on what they were taken from?
No. Based on the fact that they were all together in the washing machine in order to separately package each item at that point doesn't negate the fact that they were all, again, together in one washing machine. So, for instance, a piece of trace evidence that was on a sock could have been transferred to a towel in the washing machine just as easily as they could have in the bag they were packaged in.
Does the same hold true to items in a dryer after the dryer's been used?
Yes, it does.
Thank you. Nothing further, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Feldman, anything further?
So what you just mentioned was this notion of transfer of trace evidence, is that right?
That's correct.
So would you agree with the statement that merely because hair might have been found on a particular piece of trace evidence coming out of the washing machine, that doesn't mean it's sourced from the washing machine or from the item on the washing machine, correct?
Objection. I think that's vague.
It's just rephrase.
I'll try it again. You heard of the low-card exchange principle, sir?
Yes, I have.
What's that?
Low-card exchange principle states that when any two objects come into contact with one another, they leave evidence of that contact on each other.
So hypothetically, if I sit against a chair, I might leave some hair there, is that right?
That is right.
Is that called a primary transfer? Is that called a secondary transfer?
I believe that could be considered a primary transfer.
All right, and then hypothetically, Mr. Clark sits in the chair, and my hair hits his jacket. Is that a primary transfer or a secondary transfer?
That would be a secondary transfer.
And then Mr. Clark's jacket goes into a washing machine and gets washed and ends up on a towel. Is that called a tertiary transfer?
I believe so, yes.
Tertiary meaning third,
Third.
right? And then the towel gets moved into a different room. That's yet another transfer, is that correct?
That's correct.
And this is all what I'm articulating, or those are these questions that I'm asking you about. These are all based upon what your training and experience identifies as the low-card transfer principle. Is that right?
That is right.
So just because a hair might end up at my council table doesn't mean it started up at my council table. It could have started up at my house. Isn't that right?
That's correct.
No further questions.
Anything further?
No, thank you.
All right, is this witness to be excused?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you very much, sir, for coming in. You're free to leave these proceedings. Remember, you're under an admonition not to discuss the case with anyone until the matter's concluded, but obviously you can perform your professional duties, all right?
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, Mr. Clark?
Tanya Delaney, please, Your Honor.
All right.
Do you solemnly state that the evidence you shall give in this matter shall be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you.
Please have a seat, ma'am.
Ma'am, would you please state your name and spell it for the record?
My name is Tanya Delaney, Tanyadu, capital Laney.
Good morning, Ms. Delaney. How are you?
Good morning, I'm fine.
Who are you employed by?
I'm employed by the City of San Diego Police Department Crime Laboratory.
In what particular position?
I'm a criminalist in the trace evidence section.
We've heard the term trace evidence. Can you tell us what trace evidence is?
Trace evidence generally refers to small particles of material that can be easily transferred.
All right, could you describe for us, please, and first of all, I think you said your assignment is as a trace analyst, is that right?
That's correct.
Does that mean that that's what you do full-time in the laboratory?
Yes, it is.
Could you describe for us, please, first of all, your formal education?
I have a Bachelor of Science degree in biology with a minor in chemistry from San Diego State University.
Who were you first employed by following your education?
I worked for approximately 6 years with the City of San Diego in their wastewater laboratory.
All right, doing what?
I was analyzing wastewater samples primarily for inorganic components.
Did you then take a different position?
Yes, I did.
Where was that?
I moved over to the Sheriff's Crime Lab and I worked in narcotics, blood alcohol, and also trace evidence.
About how long did you work in the area of trace evidence at the Sheriff's Department?
About 2 years.
What positions, if any, did you take after that?
Following the Sheriff's Lab, I moved over to the San Diego Police Department Crime Lab.
When would that have been?
I believe that was 1995.
In what particular areas were you assigned at the crime laboratory with the police department?
I've always been assigned to the trace evidence section.
Since, 95 or so, 1995?
Yes.
All right, could you describe for the jury, please, other than your formal education that you already have described, your training and experience that led to your position as a trace analyst?
Upon my employment with the San Diego Police Department, I received in-house training in hairs and fiber analysis. In addition to that, I've attended a number of classes with the Sacramento Department of Justice. They have a training institute called the California Criminalistics Institute, and there I took a number of classes covering different aspects of trace evidence analysis. Some of those include the analysis of hair evidence, fiber analysis and comparison, a variety of instrumental techniques, paint analysis, shoe and tire comparison, and a number of crime scene classes. In addition to that, I've also attended a 2-week course at the FBI Academy that covered hair and fiber analysis and comparison.
Is there any way for you to estimate approximately how many cases involving trace evidence you've worked on, whether at the Sheriff's Department or at the San Diego Police Department?
I guess an estimate might be about 150 or so.
Did those cases involve hairs?
Many of them.
What about fibers?
The same, many of them.
Is your laboratory accredited by any agency?
Yes, it is.
All right. We've heard previous testimony about the accreditation of the laboratory. Does that accreditation include the trace unit where you work?
Yes, it does.
What about any training you've received in the area of evidence collection?
At the California Criminalistics Institute, I've also taken a number of crime scene investigation classes, and they do cover evidence collection and packaging for later analysis.
I'd like to talk to you first of all a little bit about hairs. Is there an approximate growth rate of the human hair, referring to head hair?
Yes, it's approximately about ½ inch a month.
Can you also tell us approximately how many human head hairs are shed by an individual person by the day?
It varies, depending on the person, but about 50 to 100 per day.
Now, were you asked to examine evidence in this case involving the disappearance of Danielle Van Dam?
Yes, I was.
Did that include examination of evidence for the presence of any trace evidence?
Yes, it did.
Okay, let's talk first of all, were you ever inside the home of David Westerfield on Mountain Pass Road?
Yes, I was.
Can you tell us when that was?
May I refer to my notes, please?
Sure.
That would be February 13th of this year.
Excuse me, Your Honor, but just for the record, could she indicate what
Would you let us know what report you're referring to and what page number, please?
Yes, this is my report from, it's dated February 15th. It was co-signed by another analyst. And it has to do with the shoes.
All right, I'm sorry, what date was that again?
February 13th.
Were you inside that residence on any other occasion?
No, I was not.
Were you ever inside a motorhome identified as belonging to David Westerfield?
Yes, I was.
Can you tell us on what date or dates that was the case?
That would be February 6th.
So you were in the motorhome on February 6th.
Yes.
On any other occasion inside the motorhome?
No,
You were in Mr. Westerfield's residence on February 13th.
that's correct.
Any other occasion?
No.
Were you ever inside the home of the Van Dams?
No, I was not.
Now, I'd like to ask you a series of questions about specific evidence items. You have reports that of your examination of evidence in this case.
Yes, I do.
I'd like to focus your attention initially on an item number 5, described as clothing from the washing machine of David Westerfield. Do you have that report before you?
Yes.
Did you in fact examine that particular clothing inside the washing machine?
Yes, I did.
For the presence of trace evidence?
Yes.
Would that include hairs?
Yes.
Would that include fibers?
Yes.
With respect to an item like that, a series of clothing, what method do you use to obtain trace evidence?
When I look at clothing, I typically use a tape lift to collect anything that might be adhering to the outer surface, and I also use bright lights so that I can see the surface, and I may use forceps to collect any loose fibers that I see on there.
As far as these tape lifts are concerned, and the jury has previously heard evidence about how tape lifts are taken, do you then examine those tape lifts as opposed to just collecting them yourself?
Yes, I do.
So you take tape lifts as part of the collection process,
That's correct?
and you also examine them when asked for purposes of determining types or the presence of trace evidence, correct?
Yes, it's actually part of the examination. I don't wait to be asked. I collect the tape lifts as a tool to help me examine what was on the item.
In particular, with regard to the clothing from the washing machine, item 5, you took tape lifts from those?
Yes, I did.
Did you also in this initial examination observe any hairs?
Yes, I did.
Did you observe any fibers?
Yes, I did.
With regard to the fibers, tell us about them. What they look like?
There was a number of orange and blue fibers on the majority of the tape lifts that I looked at.
Now, when you say orange and blue, does that mean a fiber had both colors, or are you talking about different fibers colored differently?
They were separate orange fibers and separate blue fibers.
As far as these tape lifts are concerned, did you then preserve them and label them?
Yes, I did.
For what reason?
When I initially examined them, I was looking for particular types of fiber evidence. But you never know when you might need to reevaluate those tape lifts when, as the case progresses along, you may get information that may cause you to want to go back and look at those again to see if there's any additional fiber evidence or even other particulate material that may be on the tape lift still.
You said you were looking for particular fibers. Tell us what you mean by that.
During this evaluation, I was looking for hairs that didn't belong in Mr. Westerfield's environment, specifically that could belong to Danielle Van Dam. I was also looking for other items that could be from Danielle Van Dam's environment, such as carpet fibers from her environment or any pet hairs that may be from her environment.
As part of this tape lift process, then, I gather you look at them, and then later you examine them more carefully. Is that correct?
Right. While I'm examining them under low power magnification, if I find something that looks interesting, if I find a carpet fiber that I don't think belongs in Mr. Westerfield's home, or a hair that I think is similar to Danielle Van Dam's, or any animal hairs that I think are interesting, I'll remove those from the tape lift and put them on a microscope slide for later examination.
And did you do that in this case?
Yes, I did.
All right, I'd like to turn your attention, and I'm sorry, with regard to the tape lifts from item 5, the washing machine clothing, did you label them appropriately so that it could be later determined where those tape lifts came from?
Yes, I did.
As well as the slides?
Yes.
I'd like to turn your attention to an item labeled number 6, clothing from the top of a dryer. and asked if you examined those materials as well.
Yes, I did.
Did you take tape lifts from those materials?
Yes, I did.
In your initial examination of this clothing, did you note any animal hairs?
Yes, I did.
Describe that, please.
I noted one dog, it appeared to be a dog hair on the white towel, which was labeled 6B.
B as in, I'm sorry, B as in boy.
B as in boy. That was one of the items in that laundry.
Did you label and preserve that hair?
Yes, I did.
Did you also note any fibers in your taking, and that is taking of tape lifts and initial examination of these items?
Yes, I did.
Describe them.
I found similar colored orange and blue fibers that I had seen in the items labeled item 5.
And just so we're clear, you saw some orange fibers, is that right?
That's correct.
Some blue fibers,
Yes,
but not a fiber that had both colors.
that's right.
Did you label and preserve these tape lifts as well?
Yes, I did.
Turning your attention to an item labeled number 7, clothing inside the dryer. Did you examine those items also?
Yes, I did.
Did you take tape lifts from those items?
Yes, I did.
Did you note the presence of any fibers on these items in your initial examination?
Yes.
Describe.
The same types, or similar colors of the orange fibers and the separate blue fibers.
I'd like to now turn, and did you label and preserve those tape lifts
Yes, I did.
with the correct identifying information?
Yes.
Now I'd like to shift your attention, if I could, to a series of items labeled number 9, identified as items from the bed of Mr. Westerfield in his master bedroom. Did you examine those items?
Yes, I did.
Did you take tape lifts from them?
Yes, I did.
In particular, did you examine an item number 9A, described as coming from, or rather being, pillowcases from the master bedroom?
Yes.
And you took tape lifts from those?
Yes, I did.
Did you note the presence of any fibers on those pillowcases?
Yes.
What?
There were similar orange fibers to that were in the laundry, the same color, and similar blue fibers. Oh, I'm sorry, there were no blue fibers, there were only the orange fibers.
So on item number 9A, the pillowcases, you noted orange fibers but no blue fibers.
That's correct.
Did you label and preserve those tape lifts as well?
Yes, I did.
Turning your attention to an item labeled 9C, a fitted sheet from the master bedroom bed of Mr. Westerfield. Did you take tape lifts of that item?
Yes, I did.
Did you observe any hairs?
Yes.
What?
I observed one human hair that was similar to Danielle's from one of the tape lifts.
Now at this point, when you say similar, are you looking at these items, for instance this hair, under a microscope? How are you doing that at this phase?
At this phase, no, I'm just looking for blonde hairs.
And you found one?
Yes.
Did you label and preserve that particular hair?
Yes.
What did you label that as?
That particular hair was labeled 9C-3.1.
Also, did you examine a flat sheet identified as item number 9D as in David,
Yes.
as also having come from the master bedroom bed of Mr. Westerfield?
Yes, I did.
What did you note at this initial examination with respect to that particular item?
Noted 2 human hairs, blonde hairs.
Did they appear to be similar or different, again, at this phase, from the hair that you obtained from the fitted sheet, item 9C?
Similar.
Did you, in fact, label and preserve those hairs, those 2 hairs?
Yes, I did.
What did you label them as?
The separate hairs, one was labeled 9D-2, and the other was labeled 9D-4.
Now I'd like to turn your attention, if I could, to an item number 13A, identified as coming from a garage trash can of Mr. Westerfield. Did you examine any items coming from that trash can?
Yes, I did.
What?
I examined some lint that was dryer lint that was found in the trash can.
Now when you say dryer lint, what do you mean?
When you clean, after you've dried a load of clothes in your dryer, it typically has a little compartment to take the lint out. So that's what it was. It was lint that had been removed from the lint trap compartment of a dryer.
Council, we're going to take a morning break.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remember the admonition of the court not to discuss any of the evidence or testimony among yourselves, nor form or express any opinions on the matter until it is submitted to you for decision. Please be outside the door at 11:15. That'll be 10:45, please.
All right, we are back live during this morning recess. Bill Griffith, along with noted trial attorney Jan Ronas, to talk a little bit about what you've seen this morning. A couple of criminalists from the San Diego Police Department were on the stand for all the morning so far. The name David Cornacchio was first, and Tanya Delaney continues under direct examination now. Anything that you saw that sort of caught your eye with either of those witnesses?
Sure, with respect to the witness now testifying about these hairs that appeared to resemble the hair from the known sample from Danielle being found in Mr. Westerfield's bed. I don't recall having heard they're having been found in that specific location in the past. I know there's a lot of hair floating around and having been found in the motorhome and then some in the dryer, but she's actually testifying that hair that resembled Danielle's was found in the bed. Now, I don't think, we haven't seen an analysis of this yet, and it may be that it came back as somebody else's. And then I think she found an animal hair, a dog hair, in the dryer, and perhaps they're going to tie that up with the Van Damme
with the Weimar
pet dog. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So.
A lot of distance to go here. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back with more analysis right after this. Don't go away.
Suddenly, understanding the stock market can be clear as a bell. CNBC has always been your trusted source for current news and information in the sometimes confusing world of the stock market. Now, thanks to CNBC University, you can gain the clear understanding of the stock market you need to help you plan for a successful investing future and retirement. CNBC University doesn't provide financial advice or offerings, but instead empowers you with approaches and tools that can help you make better informed investing decisions. Call now to learn how you can receive a free CNBC University guide, packed with important information that can help you get started on the path to financial independence. The time is right to answer the bell. Call 1-800-560-2796 to learn about your free CNBC University guide. It's full of the stock market answers you're looking for. When you call, ask how you can attend a special CNBC University seminar in your area. Call 1-800-560-2796 now. That's 1-800-560-2796.
Would you like to get rid of your debt? Tired of collection accounts on your credit? Let Atlantic Credit negotiate and settle your debt today. Don't file bankruptcy. Don't go to credit counselors. Don't go crazy. Call Atlantic Credit now. Guaranteed to save you thousands. Guaranteed to lower your payments. Guaranteed to get you out of debt. Rebuild your credit today. Call Atlantic Credit now. 619-325-7150 because debt-free is the way to be.
Warning. Redux, Fondamin, Fen-Phen. If you or someone you know has taken these drugs, you may have serious heart damage and not even know it. Attorneys Bellin and Lasecki are offering free echocardiogram testing to those who qualify. You could be eligible for national settlement funds up to $1.4 million. But time is running out. Find out if you qualify. Call toll-free 1-866-4FEN-HELP now. Isn't your health and peace of mind worth a phone call? Call now before it's too late.
For over 25 years, the exotic wares of Canyon Pottery were available only to designers, architects, and builders. Now everyone is shopping at Canyon Pottery and getting 40% off list every day. That's 40% off list every day on hundreds of choices of interior and exterior planters from all over the world. From 2 inches to 6 feet in diameter, you'll find domestic and imported plant containers that are different and inexpensive. Canyon Pottery's 40% off list every day. 1544 Frazee, Highway 163 at Friars Road.
Back live now during the morning recess from the Westerfield trial. Bill Griffith along with Jan Ronas. We were talking about Tanya Delaney and some of her testimony, and she testified on the stand that the first time she was in the Westerfield home was on February the 13th. I'm trying to recall when the first search warrants were executed, but I think they were about a week before that when they began the 24-hour surveillance. But either of those situations, that's still quite a ways after for those sheets, those incriminating sheets, to still be on Westerfield's bed.
Right, that's exactly what I was thinking. If if in fact those hairs that she described were found on the flat sheet, I'm somewhat surprised that the sheets weren't laundered in that period of time. I'm just surprised that they'd still be there.
Yeah, as much as in fact, he was talking about I didn't make the bed, and you know, when he had them in there the first time, he was apologizing for not having made the bed, and they said the sheets were clean and new, but that the comforter had not been put on.
Right.
Well, 10 News reporter Bob Lawrence is downtown covering this for us from the media room next door to Department 40. Bob, what did you glean this morning?
Interesting fact that I thought, and again, because of the way this trial has unfolded, it came to trial quickly, and because of that, a lot of that evidence we were talking about earlier wasn't really explained. For example, this morning they had a criminalist on the stand who certainly testified that he found a blood stain on Danielle's pajama top, also another blood stain, presumably on a man's shirt, but that the results aren't back. We don't know who that blood belongs to. They were able to exclude some samples on a beanbag chair that was in Danielle's room. But so I guess, and maybe Jan, I don't know, maybe you can back me up on this too, that the evidence is just sort of being put out there. Yes, we found this, so maybe I don't know if the jury is led to believe to draw their own conclusions because they didn't have the results yet from that particular test. I found that particular part of the testimony this morning to be interesting. That they couldn't exactly, well, okay, it was so-and-so's blood, it wasn't so-and-so's blood, found on this pajama top, found on this shirt. They weren't able to link it to anybody.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point, Jan. Yeah.
Well, I guess the other point is, these pajamas, there hasn't been any testimony as to when, I believe, that they were worn by Danielle. I don't know that the state of the evidence is that they were on her as she went to bed that evening. Mm-hmm. But, so I really don't know what the significance of blood, I mean, just as the significance of the blood on the beanbag, if it isn't Mr. Westerfield's, I don't really know what the significance of the blood is on the clothing if it wasn't worn by her that evening.
We used to call, in debate, we used to call these things straw dogs sometimes. You know, you'd put something up there and just let it fly and let the other side worry about defeating it when it really had no meaning whatsoever. And I think that may be the question that Bob was alluding to there. We're getting no information whatsoever about who these other spots belong to. There were at least 7 spots on the beanbag. He only addressed a couple of them in his testimony this morning. I'm talking about David Karnakia, the criminalist. And again, the sleeve, we haven't identified it. The hairs we're talking about, similar to Danielle's, but not positively identified yet. Is this a tactic to sort of build up to that? Do you think we're ever going to find out who those hairs belong to?
Well, I think they're going to tie up the hairs. I mean, I don't know how they would put those out there without tying them up, because it clearly would be prejudicial. I don't think the judge would let that in. There wouldn't be any basis for its admission. With respect to the beanbag, I don't know that they're ever going to clarify that. I mean, if there's 1,000 spots of blood on there, if none of it's Mr. Westerfield, I really don't know what the significance of that is as well.
Good point.
I think probably the most interesting, or one of the more interesting bits of testimony this morning was with respect to the absence of any biological evidence in the SUV, because clearly the theory is that if Mr. Westerfield in fact is the person responsible, he had to transport either Danielle or Danielle's body from his residence to the motorhome, which was 8 miles away from his residence. And you would think that there would be some biological evidence that would have been found if in fact she was so transported in the SUV, and Mr. Feldman made a big point of saying that there isn't any.
Yes, he sure did. And I also noted that Ms. Delaney here, one of the early questions, she said that a human being loses 50 to 100 hairs off his or her head a day. And of course, when you're a person who's losing his hair in a balding situation like Mr. Westerfield, perhaps that rate would even be higher. But yet we don't have any of his hairs in the house as well. We're going to pay some bills, come back in a couple more minutes. We're still in recess. Don't go away.
Have the kitchen, bathroom, or flooring you've always wanted and save at Tile Club. Buying direct from Northern Italy factories allows Tile Club to pass savings of 28 to 53% off showroom prices every day. Over 2 million square feet in stock, including Italian porcelain, travertine, marble, granite, limestone, and dozens of popular old world stone look tiles. All with personal do-it-yourself assistance or contractor referral. Get factory direct prices on quality tile every day. Shop Tile Club. Call 800-700-TILE or log on to tileclub.com.
Where are all my players? Well, the outfield's out with the flu. The infield, they have sore throats. And somebody complained they were achy all over. But don't worry about it, sir. I took care of everything.
Oh my gosh, here comes a really cute guy. Oh my gosh, you were so shaking me up.
Come on, Marge, you're gonna die for those.
Having health insurance is not only good for your employees, it's good for you as well.
Used car buyers, hey, that means you. Keller Ford Mitsubishi Suzuki has more for you. Good credit? No credit? Bad credit? Keller can help. Hot deals. Over $1 million in pre-owned cars, trucks, and SUVs. Then get Keller's exclusive security blanket of used car benefits. Ask your salesperson for all the details. Like the song says,
We've got the happiness guarantee at Keller Ford Mitsubishi Suzuki.
15 to Auto Park Way into the Escondido Auto Park.
Fast Fix Jewelry Repairs, America's jewelry repair professionals, offering ring sizing and professional jewelry repair. Spruce up your old watch with a new crystal for as low as $19. Or add a custom-fitted Spidell band. Our exclusive 5-year watch battery is very popular. We also offer professional eyeglass repair, diamond and stone replacement, and computerized engraving on glass, inside rings, and more. Visit Fast Fix today at Plaza Bonita and Parkway Plaza.
Ready to enjoy life on a beautiful new deck? Ask me. I work for Dixieline.
Dixieline, your best decking choice, has San Diego County's largest supply of decking material and accessories. Find everything you need to create your dream deck, from custom milling to home delivery. Best of all, we'll help you every step of the way, because at Dixieline, all you gotta do is ask.
Ask me. I work for Dixieline.
We're back now live on News Channel 15. Our coverage of the Westerfield trial, day 12. A couple of criminalists on the stand to begin the morning. And an interesting point you were talking as we went to break about Judge Muddin, the procedural issues and stuff like that. There was a sidebar conference where they went to the side of the bench there, the attorneys and the judge. And he actually told the jury later what it was all about. And it had to do with questioning with Mr. Feldman's cross-examination of David Kornakia concerning what was or was not found in Mr. Westerfield's Toyota 4Runner.
Right. Mr. Kornakia testified to a number of things, but one of the things he didn't mention, he didn't talk anything about the SUV. And so, in other words, in his direct examination by Mr. Dusek, and then on cross-examination, Mr. Feldman started to go into the findings, the biological findings of the SUV. There was an objection that it was beyond the scope of his direct, which was probably a good objection. They had a sidebar. The judge probably just wise, he said, let him go into it. It's going to come in any event, and then
what's that beyond the scope?
Well, beyond the scope, in other words, you are only you are limited to cross-examine on what was testified to on direct examination. So there wasn't any mention on direct examination about the SUV, so technically any questions about that were kind of beyond the scope. There was an objection. They approached sidebar. The judge just gave him some latitude to go into that area, thinking that it's probably going to come in anyway, and I think he felt compelled to kind of explain to the jury what the substance of that sidebar was, just so they'd have some understanding that Mr. Feldman was going to go into an area that wasn't covered.
And of course the whole purpose of his line of questioning was to suggest that if there is no evidence in the SUV of Daniel's presence, that means she was not there. But then there were some objections to that as well, and that was not allowed.
Again, the two huge unanswerables so far about this case, in other words, the two huge gaps for the prosecution are, if Mr. Westerfield is the right person, how did he enter and exit that residence without leaving any biological evidence, fingerprints, hair, DNA, and if he, again, was the responsible person and transported Daniel's body, either alive or unalive, from his residence to the motorhome, which was 8 miles away. It had to have been in the SUV, and again, there isn't any biological evidence from the SUV, so those are two big gaps in the prosecution case, and I'm sure it has the jury, and will have the jury, as much of the public has been wondering, how did this happen?
One of the things Bob Lawrence mentioned too a moment ago when he was reporting live from the media room was the speed with which this trial is moving along, and how that has meant it's difficult to get certain test results back from DNA labs because, for example, we saw that the stain that was found on Danielle's pajama sleeve had to be sent out and examined, and we don't know, apparently, that those results have not come back yet. So could that be part of the reason for going so quickly forward with the trial?
Well, I think it was always a theory that Mr. Feldman wanted to rush this trial because the longer it waited, maybe the more scientifically developed the case would become from the prosecution point of view, so that was always a theory. For example, the FBI agent was testifying last week about some scientific information that was developed, some analyses that were developed after the trial already started. And again, I believe Mr. Kornakia, again this morning, was testifying about some items that there's incomplete testing as of yet on. Kind of inexcusable to me if they haven't been able to get all this testing done, but nevertheless, it's been a factor because of the speed.
Isn't it counterproductive as well to bring up these things that you don't have answers for as the prosecution, whether you're Woody Clark or Jeff Dushek, when you bring these things up and can't later provide the jury with an answer? There's got to be some questions about, if not your competency, then your completeness.
Well, these are the kinds of things that sometimes jurors start asking in deliberations. You never know what they're going to ask, and they get hung up on sometimes the most mundane of issues, and this could be one of them. So you're right. You're right.
Yeah, because there were areas here that, again, we talked about the beanbag chairs, 7 stains, only a couple of them were addressed, and we went further on with some of the other items. And I was interested as well that they keep talking about stains.
Right.
It doesn't have to be a blood stain, as we heard later from Mr. Kornakia. They can be any bodily fluid, whether, of course, semen is obvious, but then perspiration and saliva. I didn't realize perspiration was in there.
Oh, sure. Well, any body fluid, and one of the customary procedures when, for example, clients of yours are asked to submit the DNA testing, they just take a saliva swab. That's all they take. They don't draw blood.
Yeah, and there's enough DNA information
Sure.
from that. Mr. Feldman also was trying to make the point, I think, about there being some other comparative markers in DNA beyond the 13 which are customarily used. Do you think that was important to this in the jury's eyes? Do you think he's going to go somewhere with that in his own presentation of his case?
Well, again, this is limited to this beanbag chair, and so I just don't see the significance from a factual point of view yet of this beanbag chair. I mean, as long as Mr. Westerfield's DNA isn't on that beanbag chair, that's good for Mr. Westerfield, and who else's might be there, unless, of course, it was some third-party, suspect. I think it's just somewhat factually irrelevant.
And again, that gives, I would think, if you have unknown third parties involved here, that you can't tie in either to any of the Van Dam family nor to Mr. Westerfield, that would, I would think, support the defense.
Right. So far, I don't recall there being any unaccounted for fingerprints or hair or other biological evidence not...
Well, we haven't heard yet about the hair that was found, and you heard Mr. Feldman ask Mr. Kornakia, who was very close to Danielle's body in Dehesa, if he saw a hair in her armpit.
Right.
He didn't ask about a hair clutched in her right hand, and I'm a little curious about that, but putting that aside, those hairs were raised by the prosecution, and we still have not had that address as to who those hairs belong to.
You're right, they haven't tied that up yet, and they may be doing so.
Yeah.
And why they, of course, I don't recall whether it was brought out by Mr. Feldman on cross-examination to try to exclude Mr. Westerfield as one of the suspects, or whether it was something brought up by the prosecution. I don't recall procedure exactly who brought it up first, but again, there's some loose ends floating around here that hopefully they'll tie it by the end of the week or whenever they're near resting.
Well, that's it. I mean, because we're getting very close, if you heard what Judge Mudd was talking about at the beginning of this particular case, and for those of you who weren't able to tune in right at the top of the hour, we'll sort of recap that for you a little bit. One of the things he was saying was that they expect that this case will be brought to a close this week, the prosecution's case, I should say, the prosecution's case, and that at some point the jury will be allowed some afternoon, perhaps Wednesday or Thursday, to go to the police holding yard where Westerfield's motorhome is still impounded.
Right.
And so let's hear from Judge Mudd himself. They're back again for the morning resumption of the session. Tanya Delaney, criminalist, on the stand under cross-examination, under direct examination.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a question and answer session for you folks. I have experimented with jurors asking questions, and quite frankly, they ultimately end up being adversarial. You folks are not advocates. You're going to have to work with the evidence you have. If you have questions that do concern you, however, the way we have to approach it is write them out, and then if I can answer them, I will. If I can't, I'll tell you I can't. All right, Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Delaney, I think we had left off with you had described examining lint from a trash can in Mr. Westerfield's garage number 13, correct?
Yes.
Did you find any hairs in that lint?
Yes, I did.
Describe them, please.
I found 3 human hairs that are blonde, and I also found 18 dog hairs.
All right, let's take that one at a time if we can. 3 human hairs, is that correct?
That's correct.
They appear, if you could tell, to be head hairs or not.
They do appear to be head hairs.
Did you label and preserve them for a later examination?
Yes, I did.
Did you give them a particular number designation?
Yes, I did.
What was that?
The number I gave them was TE-TD-11.
All right, just so that we can break this down, I think that may be there's been some mention of TETD numbers. Can you tell us what that designation means?
Yes, whenever I examine an item and I wind up creating additional evidence in the form typically of tape lists, or I remove evidence and it's going to be subsequently analyzed by myself or someone else, I typically give it another number, and the number refers back to TE being trace evidence, and in this case TD are my initials. So then this way, if someone only needs to check out that particular evidence item, they can go right to that particular item instead of checking out the whole thing all over again.
So in other words, with regard to, let's use the lint, since that's where we are, a person who wanted to re-examine that item, that is the hairs that you found in that item, wouldn't have to go back to the lint exhibit. They could look at it in the trace evidence exhibit.
That's correct.
I believe you said that these appeared to be head hairs. Can you tell head hairs from body hairs?
Yes, you can.
How?
Typically, a head hair will have a constant diameter along its length, and in general, head hairs are longer than most other body hairs, and other body hairs have tapered tips typically, and other features that will indicate which area of the body that they're from.
Now the 3 head hairs in item 13, the lint, where were they found by you in the lint?
To examine the lint, I had to use a stereo microscope for low power magnification. That's magnification up to 60 times. And in order to look through the lint, I had to take pieces of it and put it under the microscope and tease it apart with forceps. So everything that I found inside the lint, I found by teasing it apart. So it was all embedded inside the lint.
You used a couple of terms I don't think we've heard. Stereo microscope, I assume, doesn't have anything to do with music.
That's correct.
What is it?
A stereo microscope is a microscope that's used for low power magnification, as I just mentioned. And it also has a large working distance. In other words, the microscope doesn't have to be right on top of the item. It can actually be several inches away. And this allows for larger items to be placed under there, and then you're able to see and manipulate it with forceps or whatever.
You also, I think, said you used a magnification of 60, was that right?
That's correct.
What does that mean?
That means that 60 times its actual size is the magnification limit for that microscope.
So if you were to look at something with your naked eye, when you use a 60 times magnification, does that mean the item, at least through the microscope, appears to be 60 times larger than it would to the naked eye?
Yes, it does.
I think you also said that in the lint you found animal hairs. Is that correct?
That's correct.
How many?
I found 18 animal hairs.
What did they look like?
These particular animal hairs were very short, approximately 1 centimeter or shorter. And the centimeter is right a little bit less than ½ inch.
They have any, in your initial examination, did you look at them under the microscope? Or were you just collecting them at this point?
At this point, I was just picking them out of the lint and then actually transferred them to a tape list for later analysis, more careful analysis separately.
Did the 18 animal hairs appear to be similar to one another?
Yes, they did.
Did you preserve them and label them?
Yes, I did.
Can you tell us how you labeled them?
I gave those the item number TETD12.
Now, I'd like to turn your attention, if I could, to an item identified as having come from the motorhome, item 60, described as carpet area below the nightstand drawers on the driver's side. Do you recall that item?
Yes, I do.
What was your role with respect to your first examination of that?
This item was a tape lift collected by the forensic specialist Karen Lealcala, and I initially just inspected the tape lift, again looking for anything that could be from Danielle Van Dam's environment.
Did you find anything that appeared as though it may have been from Danielle's environment?
Yes, I did.
What?
A light-colored carpet fiber.
Did you label and preserve that item?
Yes, I did.
Including the label number 60?
I actually gave the carpet fiber, ultimately wound up getting another number as well.
What was that?
TETD13.
I'd like to now call your attention to an item number 74, described as carpet from the motorhome, and ask if you had an opportunity to examine that.
Yes, I did.
What were you actually presented for examination?
Well, in the laboratory, I examined a roll of carpet that had been, which was actually a section that was removed from the hallway of the motorhome of Mr. Westerfield.
Did you examine that carpet section labeled number 74?
Yes, I did.
Did you find anything in it?
Yes, I did.
What?
I found 1 blonde human hair, 2 dog hairs, and 3 light-colored carpet fibers.
Can you tell us where these locations were as far as the carpet itself? Where you found these items, can you describe that?
Well, I can refer back to my notes, but the way that I examined the carpet is, again, I used tape lifts, and this was, I don't remember exactly the length of the carpet, but it was, say, 5 or 6 feet long, so I had to use a number of tape lifts, and I started at one end, and when the tape lift was no longer adhesive, I got another tape lift, so there was a number of tape lifts. I believe there was 9. So I could only give you an approximate location relative to which tape lift it was.
Okay, so you actually tape lifted the carpet?
Yes, I did.
And you preserved those particular tape lifts for later examination?
Yes, I did.
I'm sorry, I believe you said that there were 2 hairs that you obtained, is that right?
2 dog hairs.
Okay.
And
Did
1
you
human
find,
hair.
yes, could you describe, first of all, how you label and preserve the 2 dog hairs?
The 2 dog hairs were labeled as TE, TD 12.
Did you find any human head hairs when your examination of the carpet number 74?
Yes, I did.
Describe them.
It was a blonde hair.
Was it 1 or more hairs?
1.
And did you label and preserve that particular hair?
Yes, I did.
Did you find any carpet fibers from this carpet that were foreign to that carpet itself?
Yes, I did.
What did you find?
3 light-colored carpet fibers.
Did you label and preserve those carpet fibers?
Yes, I did.
As what particular number?
The carpet fibers were labeled as TE, TD 13.
Just so we're clear, as far as these carpet fibers are concerned, did you later re-examine those particular items?
Yes, I did.
What about the animal hairs? Did you later re-examine them?
Yes, I did.
And what about the head hairs?
Also the head hair.
Human.
Yes.
I'd like to call your attention to an item described as number 77 from the motorhome bathroom sink. Did you examine that item?
Yes, I did.
What, if anything, did you find?
I found 1 human hair that was blonde.
Did it appear to be, from your initial examination, similar or not to the previous human head hairs that you've just described?
I found it to be similar to the previous hairs.
Did you label and preserve that particular head hair?
It kept its original designation as item 77.
Now, if I can draw your attention, Ms. Delaney, to the date that I believe you said you were inside the motorhome. Is that February 6th?
Yes, it is.
When you were inside the motorhome, did you search for any trace evidence at that time?
Yes, I did.
In particular, did you obtain any hairs in the course of that search?
Yes, I did.
How did that process work?
I arrived at the motorhome with another criminalist from our laboratory in that pier, and we were asked to look through the motorhome for trace evidence and biological evidence. So she started at one end and I started at the other, and we used bright lights, high-intensity lighting, and just basically combed the motorhome from one end to the other, with both of us looking and then noting any trace evidence that we found, and then I later collected it.
Did you in fact collect what appeared to be human head hairs on that occasion on February 6th from the motorhome?
Yes, I did.
How did you package and preserve them?
I packaged the hairs in paper bindles and then subsequently in envelopes, and then I gave them numbers.
In particular, was one of those hairs ultimately labeled item 80D as in David?
Yes, it was.
Where was that from?
That was found on the bath mat that was located in the bathroom of the motorhome.
Well, I'd like to show you an exhibit in Mark 51. A photo board consists of 5 photographs. Have you had a chance to look at this photo board earlier today?
Briefly.
If I can draw your attention to The last two photographs, D as in David and E as in Edward, do those photographs appear familiar?
Yes, they do.
With regard to the bath mat that you described, I'm sorry, that ADD came from? Is that right?
Yes.
Is that bath mat shown in one or both, or neither, of photographs D and E?
Yes, you can see it in both D and E.
Could you just take the pointer and point it out for us, please?
You see a little piece of it right there, and then another part of it right here.
All right, I'm sorry, the witness turned her back and I couldn't hear anything.
I'm sorry.
She's pointing to an area
In D, the carpet is right here.
Are you referring to an area at the bottom of photograph D, a little right of center, what appears to be in front of a toilet?
Yes.
And I think you also pointed to photograph E.
In photograph E, the dark mat that's near the toilet.
At the extreme lower portion of that photograph, left of center?
Yes.
Okay, if I can direct your attention again back to photograph E on exhibit 51. Do you see the area to the right of the toilet, what would be outside the bathroom?
Yes, I do.
Is that covered by anything?
Yes, it's covered by a blue towel.
Was that the way, or was that towel there when you began, or entered, I should say, when you entered the motorhome on February 6th?
Yes, it was, and there was an additional towel that doesn't show in the photo that was towards the rear, and it was green in that same hallway.
Is that in photograph E, that towel covering what was ultimately labeled as item 74, the carpet that was removed from the motorhome?
Sorry, Your Honor, objection vague as to which towel, the green one or the blue one?
Be specific, 16. The towel depicted in photograph E on exhibit 51, is that covering an area of item 74, the carpet that was ultimately removed?
Yes, it is.
Did the other towel that you observed there, not shown in photograph E, did that also cover the carpet that was later labeled item 74?
Yes, it did.
When you conducted your search of the motorhome for trace evidence, what did you do about the towels that were there?
I collected those towels in separate packages.
But when you arrived, you couldn't see underneath the carpet because of the towels, correct?
That's correct.
The particular hair that you obtained from the bath mat, ADD, was that given by you to Karen Lealfala for impounding?
Yes, it was.
Did you later examine that particular hair that was taken from the bath mat that was labeled ADD?
Yes, I did.
Did you prepare it for ship? Well, let me ask it differently. When you examined it, what did you do when you looked at it? Was that back at the laboratory?
Yes, it was.
What did you note about it?
I noted its color, its length, its contour, and that means if it's straight or curly, and any if it had color treatment or whether it had a root, and any types of physical characteristics that I noticed.
Did you package that item and prepare it for shipment to the Federal Bureau of Investigation?
Yes, I did.
Why?
The comparison of hairs is not an individualizing technique, but the addition of DNA analysis can point more closely to an individual. So the microscopic comparison of hairs is typically augmented with a DNA analysis now.
Is that why that particular hair was packaged and to be sent to the FBI?
Yes, it was.
I'd like to call your attention to an item described as number 93, a comforter identified as having been obtained from a cleaner's. Do you recall that item?
Yes, I do.
Did you examine it or take tape lifts from it for purposes of determining whether or not any trace evidence was present?
I examined the comforter, but another analyst had already collected tape lifts, and I examined those tape lifts.
What, if anything, did you discover on those tape lifts?
I found one dog hair on each one of the tape lifts.
How were the tape lifts labeled?
They were labeled 93A and 93B.
And you saw dog hair on each of them?
That's correct.
What did you do with respect to those dog hairs?
I removed the dog hairs and repackaged them.
As what?
Item TE TD 15.
Did you also have an opportunity to examine the actual bath mat? I think you said that was item number 155 from the motorhome, correct?
That's correct.
That at a time different from when you collected the hair later labeled as 80D.
Yes.
What, if anything, did you find on the bath mat number 155 from the motorhome?
I found one light-colored carpet fiber and one dog hair.
Let's start with the carpet fiber. Did it appear to be foreign to the bath mat?
Yes, it did.
Did it appear to be foreign to the motorhome carpet?
Yes, it did.
Did you collect that fiber and preserve it?
Yes, I did.
Including its number 155? Or did you assign a number to it?
It actually was assigned TE TB 13.
You also described another animal hair, is that correct?
That's correct.
Did it appear to be a dog hair?
Yes, it did.
Did you label and preserve that dog hair?
Yes, I did.
Now, I'd like to ask you about the comparisons that you made in this case. Were those done after these various items were collected by you?
Yes.
And in particular, human hairs. Did you conduct a full comparison of the human hairs in this case?
In general, no, I did not.
What's a full comparison, just so we're clear?
A full comparison would be noting all the physical attributes the hair has that we can all see with either our own eyes or low-powered magnification. And then it would also include the microscopic examination of the characteristics that you can see in the hair under high-power magnification.
Did you do that in this case?
No.
Why not?
Because we wanted to get through as much evidence as we could, we felt that the screening for the physical characteristics would be sufficient to help us figure out which hairs to send off for DNA analysis. And so that's what was done in this case. We were screening the hairs to see if they were similar in physical characteristics to Danielle Van Dam's hair. Those hairs were set aside and sent out for a DNA analysis.
I believe you said earlier that visually looking at hairs, whether under a microscope or not, is not individualizing. Is that what you said?
Yes.
What does that mean?
That means that two or more people can have hair that you can't distinguish based on the microscopic examination of the hair.
How does DNA play a role in that?
DNA can play a role in that. It can be analyzed either with nuclear DNA if there happens to be cells attached to the hair from the root area, or they can also use mitochondrial DNA if no root or root sheath material is available.
Does DNA represent a better way to tell apart similar hairs?
In many cases, DNA can individualize or nearly individualize that hair to a particular person as opposed to a group of people.
When you were conducting your hair comparison in this case, what were you looking for?
I was looking for characteristics in the hair that were similar to Danielle Van Dam's hair. In other words, blonde hairs, possibly long hairs, hairs that hadn't been color treated, hairs that may have been cut recently, and those types of physical characteristics.
When you found such hairs, what did you do with them?
Those hairs were packaged up and then they were sent out to various laboratories for DNA analysis.
All right, Your Honor, I believe had a board previously marked for identification. Must have been labeled 126. All right. Which can be described at the top as Danielle's head hairs. They're previously shown to counsel. Ms. Delaney, if I can refer you to what's been marked 126, what is this?
This is a chart summarizing the results of the hairs that I found on various items that had similar characteristics to Danielle Van Dam's hair.
Does this chart include hairs that were sent for mitochondrial DNA testing, at least in terms of the evidence hairs?
Yes.
Did you forward more hairs than are reflected on this chart for mitochondrial DNA testing?
Yes.
What does this chart then summarize amongst all of the hairs that you did forward for DNA testing? Is that question clear?
No.
All right. This board doesn't show all of the hairs that you both examined and had sent for DNA testing, correct?
That's correct.
Is this then a smaller set of those hairs that were sent for testing?
Yes, it is.
Okay, what does this group represent then? That's what I'm trying to ask.
Well, this group represents the hairs that are similar, both in the physical characteristics that I looked at, and then subsequently in other tests performed by other laboratories.
All right. That obtained mitochondrial DNA results, correct?
And or nuclear DNA.
Now, I'd like to refer you, and if you could describe the chart for us with the pointer. On the left, we have a column labeled item. Is that right?
Yes.
Does that reflect then from top to bottom the various item numbers for pieces of evidence, in this case, that you examined hair in?
Yes.
Okay, the next item is location column. Does that reflect descriptions of where these hairs came from?
Yes.
The next column is labeled number of hairs. Is that right?
That's correct.
And does that reflect, I assume, the number of hairs from each of those locations that were obtained by you?
That's correct.
Now, off to the right of number of hairs is a broad description, hair description. Is that right?
Yes.
Tell us about what each of those categories are and what they mean.
The first column that you'll see is the color, and this again is just the color that we're all going to see in reflected light. And it may be somewhat subjective, but it's my subjectivity. It's the color that I use to describe the hair. So that's this chart here, and the basic colors range from blonde to light brown blonde.
All right, if you would describe the next column to the right of color.
The next column is the root, and what I meant there is did it have one or didn't it? So if it didn't have a root, then it couldn't be sent out for nuclear DNA, so then it most likely got sent out for mitochondrial DNA.
What about length?
The first column is the length in centimeters, and that's typically what I'll use to measure the hairs when I do it in the laboratory. And then the following column is the conversion of the length to inches.
Just so we're clear, under length in centimeters, all the numbers either, well, it looks like all but a couple of them are even numbers. Is that right, as opposed to fractions? Or decimals, I guess would be the correct term.
Yes.
Does that reflect the precision with which you're able to measure a particular hair?
Yes, it basically has to do with the ruler that I'm using, and I could estimate in between the millimeters, but I just round off to, like 0.5 would be 5 millimeters, so I just round off to the 0.5.
Now the final column labeled length in inches, that appears to have not only decimals, but pretty precise numbers. Is that right?
Yes.
Why is that?
This is whoever did this calculation just put those decimals there. It's whatever came out on the calculator, I assume.
Is that by taking the length in inches and dividing it by whatever number you use to convert inches to centimeters?
Yes, it is.
But your measurements don't pretend to be as precise, for example, as 7.87 inches, do they?
No.
Now, at the bottom of this chart 126, it looks like there's written in ink an additional item. Is that right?
Yes.
Why is that?
Somehow that item got left off when the chart was created.
Now, first of all, with regard, I shouldn't say first, what is the longest length hair that you observed that ultimately DNA testing was performed on as reflected on this chart 126?
It would be 22 centimeters.
And that converts to approximately what length in inches?
Yeah, 8.66 inches.
Now, is that the longest hair found amongst the evidence hairs on this particular chart?
Yes, it is.
At the bottom is an item labeled 102, pulled head hair standards from Danielle. And listed under length is, it looks like 3 to 21.5 centimeters, correct?
That's correct.
What does that mean?
When I examined Danielle's hair, as you can imagine, there's a large number of hairs, about 50 or so. And so what I do to come up with the range of lengths is I separate the hairs and then I try to select a representative sample of all the hairs that are there. Some of the shortest and some of the longest. And then I measure just those hairs rather than measuring all 50 or however many there are.
These known hairs, item 102, were those hairs taken from her autopsy?
Yes, they were.
With regard to the lengths, we see a hair as short as 3 centimeters. Is that right?
Yes.
Does the length of hair on our heads vary?
Yes, it does.
How's that?
Well, depending on your haircut, and most people are going to have a lot of fine, shorter hairs near their temples and sometimes on the nape of the neck. And then based on your haircut, you may have layered hair, which could cause you to have all sorts of different lengths of hair. And even if you just have long hair, you may have bangs, which would be shorter than the rest of your hair. And then you also have broken hair that could be there from combing your hair and having it break.
In your examination of each of the hairs that you've described, whether from the initial collection of that evidence or ultimately comparisons you made later in the laboratory, were any of them chemically treated?
No.
Mitochondrial DNA testing then can be performed on these hairs, correct?
That's correct.
The jury has previously heard testimony about one of these items, 80D, in terms of mitochondrial DNA testing. Is 80D on Exhibit 126 one of the hairs you found to be consistent visually with Danielle Van Dam?
Yes.
Now, I'd like to ask you a few questions about preparing evidence for shipment to other laboratories other than the FBI, all right?
Okay.
Did you prepare a shipment to Bodie Technology consisting of hairs?
Yes, I did.
When did you prepare that?
I think it was about April 12th.
Did that include the 3 hairs from the limp you described from item number 13A?
Yes, it did.
Did that include 1 or more hairs from a pillow found in the motorhome, item number 53E?
Yes, it did.
Did it include hairs found in item number 58 from the RV carpet in the bedroom portion?
Yes, it did.
Did it include a hair from that same bedroom portion of the RV carpet, item number 59?
Yes, it did.
Did it include hairs from the shower drain, item number 67?
Yes, it did.
Did it include the hairs you described a little earlier today from the carpet, item number 74?
Yes, it did.
And lastly, did it include 1 or more hairs from the bathroom sink of the RV, item number 77?
Yes, it did.
Did you also send additional evidence to Bodie Technology in early May?
I didn't specifically send it myself, but I know that it was sent.
Did you participate in its preparation?
Yes.
Did that preparation include hairs from item number 5, the washing machine bedding?
Yes.
Item number 6Q, a hair from clothing on top of the dryer?
Yes.
Did it include item number 7I-H, hair from the boxer shorts inside the dryer?
Yes, it did.
And did it include a series of 6 hairs from item number 9?
Yes, it did.
That would be bedding from the master bedroom bed in Mr. Westerfield's home, correct?
That's correct.
Are those 6 hairs from item 9 listed here on Exhibit 126?
Yes, they are.
Starting with 9A-H?
Yes.
And through the other 5 particular hairs that are described from item number 9?
Yes.
Including what's written in ink at the very bottom?
Yes, including the bottom.
Now, Ms. Delaney, if I can, I'd like to ask you further questions about fibers. You described collecting fibers from various locations. Is that right?
That's correct.
And that included from the motorhome carpet by the driver's nightstand, item number 60. Is that right?
That's correct.
And it included fibers from the RV hallway carpet, item number 74?
Yes.
As well as fibers from the bath mat in the motorhome, item 155.
Yes.
Did you compare those to known fibers taken from the bedroom carpet of Danielle Van Dam?
Yes, I did.
What item number was that? Do you recall?
That would be item number 39.
What did you do to make this comparison? Describe that for us.
Each of the fibers was mounted on a microscope slide and a mounting media that allows me to be able to see through the fiber and see all the characteristics within the fiber. So I noted all those characteristics using a high-powered microscope. And then I subsequently analyzed the chemical portion of the fiber with an infrared spectrometer to determine what chemical made up the fiber. And then I used a comparison microscope and compared the known fibers from Danielle's carpet to the fibers in question in the items that I looked at.
So you start by looking at the fibers under a microscope?
Yes.
What are you looking for generally?
Generally, you're looking again for the color and the cross-section, so physical properties of the fiber. You know, the color, the cross-section, any inclusions that might be in the fiber, and also any optical properties. And you see the optical properties when you change the lighting in the microscope. The optical properties are specific to certain kinds of fibers, and they separate them out.
And I think you said you use an infrared instrument or device?
Yes.
What does that do?
That instrument is able to give you the chemical makeup of the fiber, and it has to do with the chemicals that are used to make the fiber. And when you get the printout from this instrument, it's considered to be the fingerprint for that chemical.
By fingerprint, what do you mean?
That it is identifying that chemical as whatever it is. Say, for example, if your fiber is polyester, then the printout from the infrared spectrometer is going to tell you that that is polyester or nylon or whatever the fiber type it is.
And then I think lastly you said you do a comparison of the unknown or evidence fiber to the known fiber under a microscope?
Right, and they're side by side.
Why do you do that?
It's so that you can look at the fibers along the length, and when you're seeing them both at the same time, you can make a better determination regarding the color and the diameter when you're seeing them right next to each other.
After that testing, did you reach any conclusions about whether or not those fibers from those 3 different locations that I listed for you were consistent or inconsistent with carpet from the bedroom of Danielle Van Dam?
Yes, I did.
What was that?
I felt that all these fibers were consistent with the carpet fibers from Danielle Van Dam's bedroom.
Did you take any further steps with regard to the examination of these fibers?
Yes, I did.
What?
I took those fibers to another laboratory in Sacramento that has additional instrumentation to do further testing.
Is there a name for that instrument?
The instrument I use there is called the microspectrophotometer.
What's that?
And that's a spectrophotometer with a microscope attached. And the spectrophotometer is able to give us information about the colored components in the fiber. And it provides a printout so that you can see it where the absorption of the color is, the same as what your eye is seeing, but this provides a printout and an instrumental comparison of those colors.
Do you have one of these instruments at the San Diego Police Department?
We do not.
Did you meet with a particular individual in Sacramento to conduct this additional test?
Yes, I did.
Who was that?
She's criminalist Faye Springer with the Sacramento County Crime Lab.
And then you conducted this test or this examination using, microspectrophotometer?
Yes.
I've been practicing that. With what results?
We found that these fibers all have the same, basically color, measured with the microspectrophotometer that Danielle's bedroom carpet did.
What, if anything, did that, or how, if at all, did that affect your earlier conclusions about whether or not those fibers could have come from the carpet in the Van Dam house?
This just strengthens the comparison.
Your Honor, I've had marked an additional board. I believe it will be Exhibit 127. Which is labeled at the top, Danielle Van Dam trace fibers. Ms. Delaney, if I can show you this board marked Exhibit 127. What is it?
This is the chart summarizing the results of the fiber comparison.
Can you lead us through this chart if you would, please?
The column on the left, again, is the item that the fiber came from.
Do you have the pointer there?
So again, this is the item column. So item 74, again, is that hallway carpet from the motorhome. I found 3 fibers. They were tan colored. The cross section, and that would be looking down the end of the fiber, and I actually cut these so I could look down the end of it, is trilobal. So it has 3 lobes.
Lobes meaning what?
They kind of like arms. Like if you put your 3 fingers together, there's sort of three arms.
To your knowledge, do we have photographs that demonstrate that difference?
Yes, we do.
All right, go ahead.
And then this is the diameter that I measured under the microscope, and this is in micrometers. And a micrometer, just to give you an idea, your hair is about 100 micrometers wide. So 35 micrometers would be roughly a third as wide as your hair. And then the type of fiber is polyester, and this was determined both by microscopy and by infrared spectroscopy.
So you were able to determine the type of fiber both by your visual examination as well as by the infrared device?
That's correct.
All right, go ahead.
So we have that both for 74, item 60, 1 fiber, item 155, 1 fiber, and then the results of Danielle's carpet analysis, which went through the same analysis as all the fibers. Again, tan, trilobal, approximate diameter, fiber type polyester.
So item number 39, the last row, are those in fact the known fibers that were taken from the bedroom of Danielle Van Dam that you used to make the comparison to the evidence?
Yes, they are.
And I had marked an additional board, I believe exhibit 128. It is labeled at the top cross-section carpet fibers. All right. Ms. Delaney, you put this next board on the shelf here and ask if this board appears familiar to you. What's been labeled Exhibit 128?
Yes, it does.
What does it show?
It shows the cross-sections of the known carpet samples that I was working with, that I prepared myself, and then several cross-sections from some of the fibers that I was working with, the question fibers.
Okay, if you could walk us through what's shown on the various photographs labeled A through G, if you would, please.
So this is item 39. This is Danielle's bedroom carpet.
I'm going to ask you to keep your voice up, too, if you're away from the microphone.
So this carpet was, cut cross-sections and mounted on a microscope slide, and then I photographed it. So her cross-section of her fibers is trilobal with kind of short arms.
That photograph A you're
That's
showing?
photograph A.
All right, go ahead.
In photograph B, this is a cross-section of Mr. Westerfield's living room carpet. And I believe when I went through his house, I believe his carpet is the same throughout, but this is just the living room. So it shows a different cross-section, not exactly trilobal, more like triangular. And this was item 25. In photograph C, this is the carpet from the motorhome itself. Again, it's a trilobal carpet with long arms. And you can see that the size, these are all 400 times magnification, so 400 times bigger than they really are. And you can see that there's quite a size variation between the carpet fibers. Now down here on the next row, photograph D, these are hand-cut sections. So I actually took the fiber and cut them with a razor blade to make sections to put on the microscope. So this is item 60 from the tape lift that was taken in the bedroom of the motorhome. Again, you can see it's most similar to A. Number E was from the bath mat. And there's quite a bit of distortion in this particular cross-section because of the difficulty in cutting these. But you can see it's most similar to A, but with the distortion it's a little bit difficult to tell. Photograph F is from the hallway carpet in the motorhome, item 74. Again, it's slightly distorted and kind of turned on its side, but you can see that the basic cross-section is most similar to A. And the last one, G, is another fiber from item 74, that hallway carpet. Again, similar cross-section to A, and since both these E, F, and G were found in the motorhome, you want to be sure that they're not the motorhome carpet, the blue carpeting that's throughout the motorhome, and you can see that they're clearly not that.
So based on your cross-section analysis under the microscope, Were these evidence item fibers found in items 60, 74, and 155 consistent and could have come from the carpet in Danielle Van Dam's bedroom?
Yes.
Objection, overruled. The answer will stand.
Could they have come from Mr. Westerfield's living room and other house carpet?
No.
What about the motorhome carpet?
No.
All right, I've had marked one additional board. And Exhibit 129. Further board containing photographs. Just labeled as the top carpet fiber comparison. All right. Consisting of 4 photographs, A through D. Ms. Delaney, if I can show you Exhibit 129, does it appear familiar to you?
Yes, it does.
What does it have on it?
These are photographs taken from the comparison microscope. So these are seeing the fibers side by side, the known fibers from Danielle compared to one of the question fibers.
Known fibers from Danielle, did you mean her bedroom?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay, if you would describe what's depicted in each of these photos.
So in photograph A, you can see a dividing line down the middle.
Right under the letter A at the top of the photograph?
That's correct. And you'll notice it's in every photo, and this is dividing the field so that you have Danielle's bedroom carpet on one side and then the question fiber on the other side. So in photograph A, this is one of the fibers from item 74. Now these photos were not used to do the comparison. These are just for my notes to help me remember what sort of features I was looking at and what sort of features I was comparing. So I can't really look at these and do a color comparison, but you can get an idea that the size is similar, that the shape of the fiber is similar. This is that trilobal. It's kind of sticking out at you when you're looking down on it in the microscope. And the general condition of the fibers are similar. So in B, photograph B is another fiber from item 74, and again compared to Danielle's bedroom carpet. And this is a slightly different angle. It's not looking directly down on that top lobe. One of the lobes is on the side, so you can see that there's a little bit different compared to photograph A. B is a little bit different, looking at a different angle on the fiber. So again, we're just showing the similar size and condition. Photograph C, the third fiber from item 74 versus Danielle's bedroom carpet on the right. And again, you can see on this one there's some twisting because the fibers will tend to twist. And so we're trying to show that there's similar twisting. And photograph D, this is the fiber from item 155, the bath mat. And Danielle's carpet is on the right. And then this is a similar view to what you might see in the B, where we're showing the general size, diameter, and condition.
You've mentioned polyester. Is that what these fibers were?
Yes.
Is that the only fiber out there that, let's start with carpets. Carpets are made of?
The majority of carpets are made out of nylon. And then following nylon, the next most popular is polypropylene. And then finally...
Protection foundation. Overruled.
And then finally polyester.
How about in the fiber world completely? Let's not limit it to carpet fibers. Polyester is not the only fiber, correct?
No.
Can you give us the same information about fibers even other than carpet?
Well, probably one of the most common are not man-made is cotton, most likely. And then there's a whole variety of synthetic fibers that you classify man-made fibers into, and these would be things that you're familiar with: acrylic, acetate, nylon, polyester, olefins, which would include polypropylene, and those types of fibers. I don't recall right off the top of my head which is the most common man-made. I think acrylic's probably very close to one of the most common man-made fibers for clothing. And it just depends on what sort of textile you're talking about. Each type of fiber has its characteristics that a manufacturer of a garment or a textile might want, and so then they would select that particular fiber